There has been a lot of talk about Chris Christie lately. The former New Jersey governor has been dropping hints in recent days about possibly throwing his hat in the ring to take on Donald Trump in 2024. He's out with a new book called Republican Rescue, Saving the Party from Truth Deniers, Conspiracy Theorists, and the Dangerous Policies of Joe Biden. Governor Christie, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Dan. Good to be with you.
So your book is entitled Republican Rescue. In short, give us the sort of the Cliff Notes version. What needs to be done to rescue the party in your mind?
First and foremost, Dan, we got to start looking forward and stop looking backwards. You know, this is not going to be a time when Republicans can afford to indulge in grievance politics and vendetta politics in order to get things done. If we want to win again, if we want to be a party that can take back the House and the Senate and ultimately the White House, we got to talk about tomorrow, about people's futures, about our plans and how we contrast them against the ones that have been offered by Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. And if we don't do that, if we continue to look backwards, we're going to lose. You know, in 2 years, Dan, from 18 to 20, we lost the House, the Senate, and the White House. The only other time that's happened in party history has been from 1930 to 1932 with Herbert Hoover, and we then had the Democrats have the White House for 28 of the next 36 years. We can't do that, afford to have that done as a party or as a country, in my view. And so this lays out a plan for how we go forward. It addresses each one of the conspiracy theories of the last decade, QAnon, Pizzagate, birtherism, the things around the elections, and in a very prosecutorial way, lays out the facts and the conclusions that I come to, and I hope the conclusions the reader will come to, and gives us some insight also in the first part of the book into the last year and a half or so of the Trump presidency and the role that I played as someone who was trying to help him from the outside.
I think people are going to read between the lines, and they already have, and they're going to say that what you're really saying is that the party needs to be rescued from Donald Trump. Is that what you're saying?
What the party needs to be rescued from, Dan, is this looking back, this truth denying on the results of the 2020 election.
That's what Donald Trump is doing. That's Donald Trump, right?
And yes, and what Donald Trump needs to do is to stop using that kind of rhetoric. If he wants to be a part of helping to replace Joe Biden and Kamala Harris in the future with a strong Republican president, then continuing to have these conversations does not help to do that. In fact, it hurts our ability to do that. And so, absolutely, I think that Donald Trump can be a part of the Republican future here, but only if he changes the things that he's talking about and stops talking to the My Pillow guy, about the fact that the election was stolen.
So is it fair to say that the heart of what you're talking about in terms of the rescue, though, is rescuing the party from where it's gone with Donald Trump?
Not entirely, Dan, because I think there are a lot of things, when you read the policy section of the book, that adopt the things that President Trump did while he was in office. Not all of them, but many of them. It's particularly going after the truth denying and the engaging in conspiracy theories, which distracts us from talking about the issues that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are creating through their policies and prevents us from being credible about offering an alternative to that in a way that we can attract the suburban voters that we lost in 2020 back to us in 2022 and 2024.
Is it fair to say that in your mind, Donald Trump is the leader of the Republican Party today?
Sure, I think he's the leader of the party until there's another leader. Yeah, I mean, the guy who was the last sitting president, the last Republican nominee, remains the leader of the party until he's replaced.
Who in the Republican Party would you cite as potential allies in the rescue you're looking for?
Geez, I think any Republican who wants to win, Dan. I don't think there's any Republicans who look at this and say, geez, the last 3 years have been great for us. We got swamped in 2018. We got hurt in the midterms of 2019 at the state level. And in 2020, we lost the United States Senate and the White House. So I think any Republican who wants to win will be a Republican who will look at this and say objectively that we've got to move into a different path because the path we're on is a losing one.
But if you were to gather your team of Avengers here to do the rescue that you want to go ahead and do, who's on that team with you?
Yeah, I know you want me to give you names, Dan, but
I do. Yeah, I'm looking for names.
That's going to be up to them. That's going to be up to them. I mean, look, I think I'm one of the first leaders to be speaking out in this way, and certainly the first one who has been such a strong supporter of Donald Trump's over the course of the 4 years of his presidency and a good part of his campaign in 2016. So we're going to see who comes out and follows the plan and who doesn't. But the only way for that to start is for someone to take the first step. And I want to stop Republican on Republican violence. I want to stop vendettas. And I want to get us focused on contrasting with and debunking the things that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris want to do to this country. And so whoever wants to join in that fight, I think is a pretty noble one and would be welcome in joining it.
You know, I saw you sparring with Nicole Wallace on MSNBC the other day, and she was trying to get you to basically criticize Fox News. I thought you handled yourself well in that context. I wonder, a part of your book is about saving the party, and I'm reading from it, from truth deniers, conspiracy theorists, and the dangerous policies of Joe Biden. One of the people in the media who has spread the lies and the conspiracy theories is Maria Bartiromo, who is on Fox Business. And you chose to do her show to promote your book. How do you reconcile that?
Well, because I've had a long relationship with Maria, Dan. My brother worked with Maria on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange when she first went down there. And so our families have a long connection, and we've known each other as friends for many years. And so I don't always agree with Maria and the stuff that she says. And when I disagree with it, I've said so publicly. But we can't, persuade people if we wind up ignoring the people that we disagree with. We've got to continue to engage with them and try to persuade them. And so I have a lot of respect for Maria that goes back, like I said, over 20 years. And I'll continue to consider her a friend and try to persuade her that all this conversation about conspiracy theories is not either helpful for her or useful for the country.
I get that, but it does seem when the very book is about that, right, is about some of these very conspiracy theories that you're talking about, the fact that you believe that they need to be eliminated. And then you go on with someone who is one of the people who is spreading it and don't even say to her in that interview, hey, by the way, you're part of the problem. I'm not expecting you to be out there as, some hero who's going around saying, but I do think that when you choose to go on a show like that, in particular with her, I don't mean, all these shows and all these guys. I don't like it when people do that. I'm talking very specifically about her show because she seems to be the very person you're talking about in your book.
Well, look, I think that it says a lot about her that she had me on, because she knows exactly what the book was about and exactly what I was talking about. And so the fact that she reached out, given what the subject matter of the book is, and asked me to be on the program, I think says a lot about Maria. I think the easiest thing for her to do would be to not invite us, to not have an open conversation about the book on her program. So I actually look at it the opposite way, Dan. I think Maria is to be respected for the fact that somebody who wrote a book that very clearly debunks many of the things that she's been saying, that she's got the guts and the professional honesty to invite that person on. I give her kudos for that.
I hear that, except that you didn't challenge her on it, right, on the show. I mean, then she gets the real credit, right? If you come on...
The book challenges her. I mean, look, she read the book. I mean, it was clear from her questions this morning that she had read. So, Dan, once she read the book, if she was like the left has been on this, she would have canceled me and not had me on the program. But instead, she read the book and she asked me questions about it in, I think, a fair, honest, and direct way. And I admire her for doing that.
We will have more of my interview with Chris Christie later in the week. Thank you for watching. Click the red subscribe button below so you can get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.